All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the absolutely most high-stakes, flawlessly executed engineering marvels in existence. And no, we aren't talking about a rocket ship or some massive skyscraper. We're talking about the temporary biological machinery that sustains fetal life. Seriously, it's an intricate, perfectly timed life support system that grows, operates flawlessly for 9 straight months, and then, in literally a matter of minutes, completely dismantles and rewires itself.
I mean, think about it for a second. How did you breathe, eat, and survive for 9 months before your lungs even worked? It's a pretty wild question to ponder, isn't it? Our early biological existence is honestly almost alien compared to how we function right now. You were essentially living entirely underwater, completely 100% reliant on a temporary external power plant and this massive network of biological bypass highways just to stay alive.
Okay, so let's quickly map out this blueprint. We're going to logically reverse engineer this piece by piece. We'll cover the anatomy of life support, crossing the placental barrier, fetal appendages and the cord, the circulation highway, clinical conditions, and we'll finish up with the dramatic first breath rewire.
Kicking things off with Section 1, Anatomy of Life Support.
Let's start with the absolute cornerstone of this whole operation, the placenta. This is a temporary, disc-shaped organ that weighs about 500 grams a term. And guys, this is the central power plant making early survival possible. Before a fetus have functioning lungs, or a working digestive tract, or even fully capable kidneys, this single organ steps up and acts as all of them combined. It is the ultimate biological multitasker.
Now, what's truly fascinating here is the origin of this power plant. It's actually a joint construction project built by 2 entirely different individuals. The fetal part derives from the bushy chorion frondosum, and that meets the maternal part, the decidua basilaris, which is basically the modified lining of the uterus. And this brilliantly illustrates a core concept we need to understand. These 2 distinct systems meet and interact intimately, yet the fetal and maternal blood never ever actually mix.
Moving right along to Section 2, crossing the placental barrier.
So you're probably wondering, if the blood never mixes, how on earth does the fetus get what it needs? Well, it happens through a highly selective border control system. Things like oxygen, vital nutrients like glucose and amino acids, and crucial IgG antibodies that give the fetus passive immunity, those easily cross over. But notice the vulnerabilities here. Alcohol, certain drugs, and a few sneaky viruses like rubella and HIV can unfortunately also slip through. On the flip side, though, most bacteria and normally maternal blood cells are completely blocked. So it's an excellent security system, but it's definitely not impenetrable.
But hey, the placenta doesn't just filter things, it manufactures them. Think of it as the ultimate biological Swiss Army knife, secreting all these crucial hormones. It produces HCG, which is actually the basis of modern pregnancy tests, and that maintains the early pregnancy. Then, by about week 4, it starts taking over the production of progesterone, which is the hormone that literally keeps the entire pregnancy viable. It also pumps out human placental lactogen for fetal growth, and estrogens. Honestly, this organ is a chemical factory running 24/7.
All right, Section 3, Fetal Appendages and the Cord.
So we've got the power plant generating supplies, right? Now we need the physical supply line to actually transport them, the umbilical cord. Notice the incredibly specific anatomy here. It's covered in this protective mucus connective tissue called Wharton's jelly, and it contains exactly 2 arteries and 1 vein. Now, the absolutely crucial thing to remember here is how counterintuitive the blood flow is. Unlike in the adult body, the 2 umbilical arteries carry deoxygenated blood away from the fetus back to the placenta, while that single umbilical vein brings the freshly oxygenated blood from the placenta directly into the fetus.
Real quick, while we are on the topic of fetal appendages, I want to share a handy mnemonic cheat code regarding another structure, the yolk sac. The yolk sac eventually pinches off, but sometimes a little remnant gets left behind, and that leads to a clinical condition called Meckel's diverticulum. If you're trying to memorize this, just remember the rule of 2s. It occurs in 2% of the population, it's located 2 feet from the ileocecal valve, it's 2 inches long, and it can contain 2 types of ectopic tissue, usually gastric and pancreatic. Just a helpful little shortcut.
And to kind of ground all this abstract anatomy in reality, consider the numbers 50 to 60. That is the average length in centimeters of the umbilical cord at term. It's a physical tether, roughly 2 feet long, completely sustaining life. Shifting gears now to Section 4, the fetal circulation highway.
Okay, so the oxygenated blood has reached the fetus. Where does it go? To understand fetal circulation, you kind of have to realize that all the normal rules are completely thrown out the window. You and we rely on functional air-filled lungs to oxygenate our blood. But fetal lungs, they're completely fluid-filled and have this incredibly high-pressure resistance. Because of this, the fetal body has to engineer special bypass highways to route the already oxygenated blood from the placenta to the rest of the body, so it doesn't just get bogged down in those non-functional lungs. Let's trace this out. First up, our first critical bypass, the ductus venosus. Oxygen-rich blood surges in from the umbilical vein, heading straight toward the liver. But the liver doesn't need all that oxygen right now. It's not actively metabolizing a heavy meal or anything, so the ductus venosus acts as a specialized shunt right inside the liver, fast-tracking the vast majority of that oxygenated blood directly into the inferior vena cava. It just skips the liver sinusoids entirely and heads straight for the heart.
Boom. The blood arrives at the heart, specifically the right atrium. Normally, blood would go down into the right ventricle and straight out to the lungs. But remember, the lungs are closed for business. Enter our second bypass, the foramen ovale. This is an actual hole. It's a pressure relief valve built right into the wall between the two upper chambers of the heart. It shoots that oxygenated blood straight across from the right atrium into the left atrium, completely bypassing the right ventricle and the lungs.
Of course, some blood is inevitably going to slip down into the right ventricle and get pumped toward the lungs via the pulmonary artery anyway. But the body is ready for that. It has one final biological detour, the ductus arteriosus. This is a tiny vessel connecting the pulmonary artery directly over to the aorta. It grabs that stray blood and shunts it right back into the main systemic circulation. These three brilliant little shunts ensure absolute maximum circulatory efficiency before birth.
Which brings us to Section 5, Clinical Conditions and Complications. Now, with a system this incredibly intricate, there are obviously going to be vulnerabilities, and understanding this anatomy really matters when you're dealing with high-stakes medical situations. For instance, if the placenta implants too low and covers the cervix, it's called placenta previa, which causes painless bleeding. If it attaches way too deeply into the uterine muscle, that's placenta accreta. If it prematurely separates from the uterine wall entirely, that's abruptio placenta, which is a really severe emergency causing painful bleeding and fetal distress. Furthermore, if our fetal bypass highways fail to close up after birth, we see conditions like patent ductus arteriosus, or PDA. That's a left-to-right shunt that causes pulmonary overcirculation, and it actually presents to doctors as this very distinct, continuous machinery murmur.
And finally, Section 6, First Breath System Rewires.
This is honestly the climax of our entire explainer, the dramatic, chronological cascade of birth. Listen to how this incredible transition happens. Step 1. The baby takes its very first breath, and the lungs expand with air instead of fluid. Step 2. Because of that massive change, the pulmonary vascular resistance drops dramatically. Suddenly, the lungs become the path of least resistance. Step 3. The umbilical cord is clamped, stopping all flow from the placenta. And Step 4. Because the pressures inside the heart just instantly flip, those temporary shunts, the ductus venosus, the foramen ovale, and the ductus arteriosus, they functionally close within minutes to hours. One single breath fundamentally rewires the entire cardiovascular system.
But here's the craziest part. The echoes of this fetal system, they actually stay with us. 25%. That is the percentage of perfectly healthy adults walking around today with a patent foramen ovale, or a PFO. That little pressure valve hole in the heart between the atria? In 1 out of 4 people, it never completely fuses shut anatomically. It just remains there as a tiny, usually totally asymptomatic remnant of their time in the womb. 1/4 of us are literally still carrying a piece of our fetal life support system right now.
So wrap your head around that. We all started as aquatic beings, entirely reliant on a disposable 500-gram organ and this intricate network of temporary blood vessel bypasses. The sheer precision required to build this system, keep it running perfectly for 9 months, and then instantly dismantle it, it is nothing short of miraculous. And it leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to ponder. If a single breath can completely rewrite our entire cardiovascular system in a matter of minutes, what other incredible, temporary biological machinery inside of us are we completely taking for granted? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.